any of you have a southwestern facing window, there is the most gorgeous rainbow out there.
Wow.
It's
Wow.
so
Go
bright.
see. Everyone go look really quick. It's been really interesting as I just looked out the window now where there's been wind blowing all over the place but you look out the window and it was nice and sunny. And so I knew it was going to probably have a rainbow. So.
It's not in my view.
Oh. Wait, I'll try to get it in all of our views. Let's see.
Oh.
I can't quite get the rainbow, but you should see this. Can you see all that out there?
Yeah, what is that?
That's just the sunset. I don't know what.
That, at your house or at church?
It's at church.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
I always come here because this has better bandwidth here.
You don't have to.
All right, so what we're talking about is celebration. What are you celebrating today? What are some things that happened this week that are wonderful and amazing and easy to celebrate, like an 80th birthday of a Dalai Lama? What are some of those things you're celebrating?
I guess in many ways it's a celebration, but it's a celebration in a sad heart. One of my high school classmates passed away a week ago yesterday, and he just absolutely loved life. And it was just not that many weeks ago he was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and in many ways I'm glad he went as quickly as he did, because he would have missed celebrating as much as he could of every day because he would have been so sick. So.
And you're going where we need to go today, because it's not always celebration in the wonderful spaces. In fact, in a much more real way, it's trying to figure out how to celebrate when it is a departure, right? Like the second chapter brings this to, when it's different than what you wish, when it's not your chosen path, being able to celebrate and find joy in that moment. But I love that St. Francis chooses to call our main thing we do together celebration, because even in those sad moments, even in those difficulties, it is a celebration, right? If we remember the types of things they were trying to help us remember here. So what's another celebration for you? Jade. Great.
I've been really busy with work, and I had a really good work week with clients that I've really enjoyed spending time with and working with, and it's just delightful.
Nice, thank you. Who else has joys, excitement, celebration?
I'm celebrating the little bit of progress that I made this week and getting a little bit more organized. It's not a great deal, but every little bit helps.
A little bit of organization.
Yeah, and I'm celebrating Marge. So
yeah. We're going to talk about that in a second. Jamie, try looking in your computer and seeing if maybe your volume is turned down there somewhere in your control panels or something.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
A little bit, yeah.
Okay, I've got a using the headphones.
Perfect.
With the mic.
I have a celebration for me. I'm thrilled about Harris being the VP pick.
That's a good celebration, isn't it?
Right. It was the happiest I have been in 5 months.
Yeah. Joni might tell you at this moment, if she was here, that as we were moving towards who was going to be the nominee, I was really kind of against the older group, right? All of them, not because I didn't think they were competent, but because I wanted somebody of the new generation, and Kamala was the one that I most typically held up, and because she's just a marvelous, brilliant voice. So So I have to tell you what happened to me this afternoon between the two classes. I finished the class from 3 to 4 o'clock, and I got in my car and I went down to Pepe's house and sat and held Marge Hefty's hand as she passed away and took her last breath. And as she essentially let go of my hand and grabbed hold of Homer's hand and went off into that larger room with him. And so as I've been getting ready for this book of joy, this celebration time, that's what's been on my heart as I've tried to say, what do I say here? And yet, as I look at Marge, she did a lot of celebrating with me, right? I remember her looking at me one Sunday and said, the aura around you is huge this morning, right? I remember her telling me about all the things that her and Homer had done together, all the ways that they had investigated the world, right? The call that I just had was telling David Wilkinson about that and inviting him to be part of that, about the talking. And it is a celebration, even as we move away from Tibet, right? And we go to the next stage of things. And I mean that in a lot of different ways, because the reality is these two very old men that have been speaking to us through this book aren't going to be around very much longer, in the longest scheme of things. And yet there's so much that they gave us during these weeks together to be able to carry us and give us joy and help us through all that difficult time, right? So that's what we want to do today, is as we finish up our conversation together, is really celebrate what it is that we carry forward. What is it that we have that continues to cause our hearts to celebrate? So tell me some of the ways that this book is living on in you already. And much of that question is still to be voiced through your life, but what is it so far that you see as part of what's going on for you? Go ahead.
Me?
Yeah.
I like the pause that they talked about in the book, and
Yeah.
how pausing and then responding, and being conscious of that, because I've never really thought of that before.
Yeah, and just taking that slight second, even if you take it, or if you can, a little bit more. I have a friend of mine who any important email, she says, I will never answer it that day. I will always wait until the next day to respond to it because of that pause. So thank you. How about the rest of you? What do you carry out of this? Go ahead, Garnet.
Just joy. I mean, I love to see the pictures of them looking at each other and smiling, and reading about the shared heartfelt joy that they had for each other and had about being in presence with each other. And that's important for all of us to really find those times of joy as many times a day as possible.
They had a true spiritual love affair, didn't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it came out very easily in the reading of it to see that.
I can chime in on that one. We just started the book from the beginning. As everyone knows, we started in the middle of the class, and we loved the book. So we started reading the introduction. And in the introduction part, they talked about the first time the Dalai Lama was with Desmond Tutu. And the Dalai Lama was kind of playing with him like they're going on stage, and he's choking him. And Desmond Tutu says, "Now's the time you're supposed to be the holy man." So yes, it was just so endearing. To answer your question from the last section, a celebration, the question was, with all the misery around us, and it reminded me of what I already know, how do you find the joy? And it's a choice. We all are always at choice.
Right.
And what do we want to buy in? The book drilled into us that joy is an inside job.
Yes.
We're not getting it from out there.
No. And very often it's both inside here, us, but it's also inside the relationships. At one point in here, it said something like, talking about those kids telling that story, that it was the people that they knew that was their greatest source of joy. It was the relationships that they had. And so it's that inside job of me being in relationship to this other person and that giving me the joy. And so, for example, with Marge, you didn't have to talk to her very long to know that one of her greatest sources of joy was Homer. Right? And that radiated out of what their relationship was. So I guess that begs the question of who are the people who give you the greatest joy, who have helped you to discover joy, who just in their presence you have joy. Who's somebody for you?
I have to say, my clients that I work with on a regular basis, well, not just all my clients, they bring me such joy, and they open up to me, and sometimes I can bring them joy by listening to them, but yeah, and the laughter that sometimes I can give them, and definitely how many times they can give me laughter. So yeah, I love my clients.
Thank you. Who else is joy for you?
I have one girlfriend, Lori, that I've known since I was 18, and we've been able to do a lot of traveling together, sometimes with students. And so where we've been together, we've experienced joy, not only, being at the Great Wall of China and in Italy and so forth, but that we experienced it together, and that we have joy in the memory of it. And so nobody else has done that. I mean, those experiences have always been with her. I do get a lot of joy out of my dog, I have to say, too. So,
absolutely. Hey, the good thing about a girlfriend like that is you have to keep her really close to your side, because she has too many stories on you too.
Yeah, right.
You don't want her to start telling.
Oh, that's funny. How about you, Jim? Who gives you joy?
Oh, lots. Much of my joy in people comes from some of the most difficult spaces of my life. Within a very short time, my dad died, and a 7-year-old friend of ours died. His name was Joe. And anytime I think of those two, joy comes into my heart. In fact, when Joe died, I wrote a poem that said, he's playing with the angels. He's dancing in the sky. Because he was such a joy-filled kid that when I look back at him, although it was painful to have him die, it was a very unexpected accident. He always fills me with joy. And so sometimes it's those people that I go back and I say, they're still alive in me. They're still with me.
Mm.
Go ahead, Jay.
Go ahead.
Well, we have screech owl houses, and we have screech owls that come back year after year, and they mate and they have babies, and then we watch them every day until they teach them to fly, and then they fly away, but they come back. The juveniles come back for a little bit, and I can walk up to the screech owl that's outside my office here, about 5 feet away, and he won't move, and he just looks at me, and I look at him, and I really get a lot of joy, especially the day they teach the babies how to fly. I'll take the whole day off if that's happening.
Just
And
watching.
Oh, love it. And then last year they flew out into the sunset. Mama took the Screech Owls into the sunset, and I saw the last one.
Nice. Thank you. I like that a lot. Jamie, did you have something that looked like you might have been raising your hand? Okay. I think you always want to remember who all those people are. Partially because if you remember at the beginning of the chapter on departures, it said something along the lines of, we receive a transmission from, right? Some people somehow come onto our wavelength and give us something. All those people who become our heroes, our saints, our role models, those people who somehow instill in us a joy that carries us through everything. But then it said the second thing, and we pass it along too. So who are the people that you are being asked to show the next step to? Who are your mentees? If that makes sense. Some people talk to me and say, I love how you love kids. And I said, it's not really that I love kids, it's that I love their joy and I love being able to be part of how they discover life. You know? I love sitting with our kids and seeing sparks come into their eyes as they catch on to something. So who are your mentees? Who are you've been who have been essentially entrusted to you to help them to discover? It doesn't have to be a young person. Sometimes it's an old person that you're helping. Jade?
Oh, we have rentals for years, and a lot of them are U of A students, and some of them we get that are just first time out of home. And we have the conversation that, you know, it's a relationship of mutual respect and so forth. And like we have ones that have stayed with us from the time they start in college, freshmen, up to getting their PhDs. They send photos of their kids. One of our tenants, they were Mormon. They had 3 kids while he was getting his, I think, PhD in architecture. And they called us and were all or emailed us. We're so concerned about us down here with COVID and everything. And we just have really long-term relationships with these people. And they're just you know, people think of like people in their 20s and these people, I wish I was so mature and looked at the world like they do. And it's just a wonderful part of our lives.
But part of what happens in a relationship like that, Jade, is they do kind of mentor you into being able to see better than just whatever your perspective would be. And so you get to be more of a 20-year-old because you get to see some of life through their eyes, right?
Yeah, it's a wonderful experience, like a blooming flower. And then some of them take graduate studies out of the country and then come back. And so we sit down and we learn all about a different country through them and what they learned, and, you know, absolutely wonderful.
Yeah.
I don't think, as Picasso said, youth has no age.
Yes. Right.
And I like that. I was just going to mention that when I lived in Tacoma, I took over my husband's job as a play director at his old school. And that was really a hard thing to do because he had been there for like 30 years. And so it was a tough transition to follow him. But the good thing that came out of that was when we came here, I've really made it a point to reach out to people that were in my situation. So like when Trish Moore took over Robert and Sela's position as a director, I made sure that I really, you know, talked with her and got to know her. And then, you know, when Cynthia came on, I went out to, you know, I said, let's go out to lunch. So I think even though that was a hard experience for me, I learned from it. And hopefully I've, you know, really tried to welcome And you would be another one, Jim, when you came on board 5 years ago or whatever. Mike and I said, we are going to reach out to that guy. We don't know him at all, but we want him to be welcome here. And so that's how a bad thing can turn into a good thing.
And those of us that are moving into brand new situations like that depend on some people being that, which helps us bridge the gap between both my past and your past. So thank you.
And I think on Sunday you said you're ready to start you are starting your 7th year with St. Francis?
Yes, I've been here 6 years now.
Wow.
So
It's hard to believe.
it's crazy, isn't it? I told the SPRC when I first came here, all I need is 17 and so I can retire. In the Methodist Church, you have to retire at 72. So I would be 17 years. So I just need 10 more years now after this one. I'm not sure Joni wants me to last that long, just so you know. So goodbyes are part of life. But goodbyes, I love when a family chooses to call that goodbye a celebration of life rather than a funeral or a memorial, or that sense of remembering and using that person to celebrate not just their life but your own life and what's happened to it. Most of those people who are most important to me, it's because they were the ones who helped me to, in the words of the authors, enter into my heritage. They taught me something about who I was. They taught me something about what could be possible for me. And they drew me towards a bigger picture of me in some way or another. And so who taught you your heritage? Who taught you what could be for you? I think of people like Coach Leonard, who was my main track coach during most of my high school career. And he just gave me so much about saying, essentially, this is what Jim the runner is, which was really saying, this is who Jim, the core of Jim is. And he helped me discover that. Talking to David again today, I remember what an amazing voice he is for all of us towards setting part of the heritage of who we are. Many of the ways that I talk are a direct reflection of what he said to be able to set that stage for all of us. He set the heritage for us all, or helped. Who was it for you guys?
I think anybody that believes in you, that makes so much difference. I had a high school teacher that would make little nicknames of your name. So my maiden name was Quillen, Irish name, and he would call me Ready, Quillen, and Able. And I've never forgotten that. And high school friends of mine that had him as a teacher, they each had their own story like that.
Yeah.
And it's like amazing how something so small can stick with you. Nice. During an open house, an art teacher told my father that I should go on in art. And I've never forgotten that. And as an art teacher, I make sure to tell that to parents and kids so that it instills in them. It's like, really? I could do that? Yes. Just having someone say, yes, you can, is tremendous.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. What else?
Well, I have to say that there was the person that owned the school that I used to teach at in my profession. She had at one time made a recommendation. I consider running to be on the board for our state chapter for the profession. And I did that, and I ended up on that board, and that so she saw some leadership in me that I didn't see in myself. And that led on to chairing a national ethics committee, and that led on to being on a national board, and that led on to be the chair of that national board. And she saw some leadership in me. Well, I believe that, that she saw some leadership in me, that she kind of gave me a gentle nudge to start on step one, and I took the other steps.
And sometimes it only takes one person to be able to do that. Now, maybe there's other people that are speaking that same truth, but sometimes you just need one person to speak it in such a way, with such a clarity, that you hear it differently and you believe it. One of the words that came up often in this chapter was the word purpose. I think part of discovering joy in your life is figuring out what true purpose your life has, right? And how it is that you are going to be in the world and change the world in some way or another. That's part of that heritage, that someone says, look, you have the skills to be this. You have the skills, you have the temperament, or whatever it happens to be, and someone says, maybe this is your purpose. And usually they don't ask it quite like that, but they help you to ask that question of yourself.
And don't you think that changes, that there's more than one purpose?
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, look at my life, where I was an elementary school teacher, and I knew I was going to be a teacher from the time I was in 8th grade. I remember knowing that, right? And so to leave that profession, even to go to something that I thought was high and noble, like pastoring, it was a really hard thing, because it meant rediscovering purpose. Even though I think I do the same thing in this profession as what I did there, it was having to find a different way of voicing that purpose, which is what we all have to do, because we're not the same people we were. Some of you look like you are, but we're not the same people we were when we were 20. Right? And so what was our purpose then may be very different than what we're discovering today, right? Oops, sorry. Sorry. That was Melissa calling. I left her a message about Marge, so I just need to call her back in a little bit. But the goal of human life is to find that purpose, and in that purpose find that joy, because that gives us something much more important than all the ways we often define things. You know, we often define things by, did I make enough money? We often define things by, you know, did I get this job done? Not necessarily bad goals, but what these guys are telling us is that it's the deeper, more important stuff, the truly fulfilling your purpose and finding the joy in life. It's most important. So what has taught you to do that? And where do you today find yourself trying to redefine that and discover it again?
Well, I just wanted to say, last week you talked about compassion, and you oftentimes will say, and you're going to have to deal with that. You're going to have to deal with being compassionate to people that are difficult. That was what it was. Yeah. And at the time when you were saying that, I thought, oh no, I don't want to do that. I don't, you know, it's just me and Mike. I'm not going to have to deal with any difficult people. Wrong. I had this conversation with one of my sisters about politics, and it wasn't happy. And I thought, oh, here's what Jim was talking about. I'm going to have to be compassionate to her, and it's really hard. Anyway, I just wanted you to know really that your purpose last week came true.
My week challenged me that way with a guy named Dean. I don't like to be able to, deal with Dean, but here he was. He'd taken a 2-week hiatus, and it was the greatest joy of my life for those 2 weeks. And he's back.
Jim, can I just ask, do you
Yes.
have like an ultimate motive for sticking with him and sort of enduring everything that he dumps on you, or are you just there because you're supposed to be there?
I think that much of what drives my conversation with somebody like that is part of our statement of purpose at St. Francis, who we are as a church. And it's this line towards the bottom of that says, none of us are saved until all of us are saved. So it doesn't matter how much I am mad at, how much I wish he didn't have to come along. This is us moving, not just all of us, but. And my life was marked by somebody choosing to include me in. And so that's part of my purpose, is to include people in. So compassion literally means with suffering. That's what it means, right? That's the breakdown of the word. And sitting with someone in the midst of suffering, sitting with someone and finding purpose in the midst of that suffering is essential, right? So in the relative passion we're going through, right? The separation, the social isolation, the racial unrest, the struggles of right now, which I prefer to think of as birth pangs. How are we going to help each other get through that? Right? What words are we going to whisper in each other's ears that say, this is leading to joy? It doesn't feel like it right now. How are we going to do that?
Well, I remind people that this too shall pass, and that, where we are now is not where we're going to be in 6 months. And hopefully this will all be history at one time, and we'll remember what it was like, but it's going to be different. I don't know exactly how, but some of, you think about the Black Plague, the Renaissance followed the Black Plague. So something wonderful will emerge. I don't know exactly how or what, but there is sort of a unifying force throughout the world that somehow this is uniting us in a weird way. So,
and I hope it's somewhat similar to like what happened at the end of World War II when 2 bombs went off and destroyed, right? This week we're celebrating 75 years. Celebrating isn't the right word, 75 years of Hiroshima, right? And yet that moment also changed us in a whole different way. As a nation, we became very different as World War II ended. As a world, we entered into a new stage. Nuclear-wise, it changed us because of that moment. Seeing a bomb went off made us all aware that we don't want to see another bomb go off, right? And it's that we have to look at. So in 75 years from this moment, what do we hope changes in the world because of what choices we make now? And it's not that there weren't a lot of difficulties afterwards. The specter of nuclear war hung over us for a long time, post-World War II, right? But somehow we figured out that that's not a choice we want to go down, not a road we want to go down, sorry, not a choice we want to make. And seeing those bombs changed us, I think. So how will this change us and say that's not what we want to be? Go ahead, Jade.
I think that with race and the race, a lot of people have had an opportunity to really think out the racial issues in our world because they're kind of stuck at home and they're not running as fast as can be. And, you know, because they were so ingrained for centuries, I think it's not like it just ended with Martin Luther King or this or that. And it's just, I remember when I was a young girl, we would go to Chinatown, and you would never see a white man or a mixed race couple. Okay, when I was a kid, and it was illegal in some states to marry. Now, if you see a mixed race Asian couple, I mean, that's just very, very common.
Yeah.
And it's just, it doesn't happen overnight, but I think this is kind of like the next step after what happened in the 60s.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Just get better.
Yep. And the 60s birthed a lot of things, you know, right? That was a birth pang type of time, and it birthed a lot of things. And now it's time to rebirth one more time, but we'll come out of it. And I look at racial issues right now, and it's time for us to not just say we solved, but really take some steps to solve it in a new way. The hard part is, and I've told you this story before, I think, is that I learned long ago that to get to a new space, you have to go through chaos. Good news is we're going through a lot of chaos, right?
Mm-hmm.
The question is whether we run backwards from the chaos or we embrace the moment and move forward through it. Because if we move forward, we'll get to a brand new, amazing community, right? Something that we can't quite imagine from right here, because we'll have to let go of some things in the midst of that chaos. But we'll get to somewhere if we endure. And I think it's things like joy, that larger picture that they talk about, that will help us be able to do that. But I think that's at least part of what what David Wilkinson meant when he talked about the much larger room, right? That there's something bigger and better than right here, right now. And can we allow ourselves to go to that space? I loved the section where they talked about religion. Here's a leader of two major world religions, right? World sects. And in the midst of this conversation about religion, they have this thing. Well, I'm just going to read the quote because I love it live. Religion is not sufficient. Just to pray or rely on religious faith is not sufficient. It will remain a source of inspiration, but in terms of 7 billion human beings, it's not sufficient. No matter how excellent, no religion can be universal. So we have to find another way to promote these values. I think the only way really is, as we've said, through education. Education is universal. And so he's drawing us towards the next iteration of what we're going to be, right? Not that religion goes away, but it takes on a different role. So he's taken his profession and he says, we have to hold it differently. And how hard is it for us to say, let's make everyone else change, but I'll hold on to my stuff really tight. Instead, like the Dalai Lama, how do we hold on to our stuff loosely as we move towards? Not to let go of it completely, because it still has that inspirational quality, but how do we help it to become a better force because we're not holding on to what used to be its force? When my daddy died, I learned better than any other moment in my life that you truly have to let go of who you know him to be in order to move to where he's still alive in you. Right? If I'm still trying to say dad is only this man that I can hold on to and not the spirit that still speaks through me, if I'm stuck on this place, I don't move into the joy of who he continues to be for me. Because I could make that transition, I can have him very, very present with me on a regular basis now, and a true source of joy for me. So in the midst of all this, what does it feel like you're losing that isn't a complete loss, but means that you have to retransform it into something that you can hold on to differently? Jade.
I would equate it to languages. If you know one language and then you learn another language, you still know the first language. And then if you learn a little bit of another language, it all adds up to a mosaic of experiencing, communicating more openly.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. I like that. I like that analogy a lot, because I've seen people who have essentially said, I can't learn a new language because I only have this. And it's like, no, you can learn a new language really well. People tell me all the time when I talk about Spanish, for example, they said, oh, kids can learn languages really well. They can learn languages better than me. And you know that that's completely wrong. Adults can learn languages much better than kids can. You know why? Because we have the cognitive skills to be able to do it, but we don't take the time to use those cognitive skills. You have to think about and choose to do it. But when you do, what you learn is that what I know in Spanish absolutely helps me to understand my English better. What I know in English helps me to understand my Spanish better. And I don't have just 1 + 1. I truly have more than 1 + 1, because they both enhance the other. And you're right, Jade, the more languages you know, in Spanish, we have a saying that says, uno que habla dos, vale dos. One who speaks two is worth two. What else? So where do you hope spirituality takes us? What do you hope happens next?
Yeah, for me, it's awareness of the oneness. We're not separate people. We're all connected.
Mm-hmm.
It would be nice if the world saw that.
It would be nice, wouldn't it?
I think maybe one of the silver linings of this COVID-19 is that we're all in it together.
Yeah, not just here in the United States, but around the world. And I think, Liz, we had gotten too convinced that we were the most powerful thing on the planet. And so we said we just have to be against all those other powerful things on the planet. And all of a sudden COVID teaches us, well, that larger story. I think that's a good thing. Rest of you, anything else?
I think that one of the things that seems to be, something that's different is the churches using the various medias, like doing this class and having church online. And yeah, ideally it's wonderful to have everybody in the same room and celebrating together, but there's always been that that portion of people that for whatever reason couldn't be there. And I'm thinking especially of the elderly that can't get out and go to church anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that with just a little bit of people knowing a little more technical stuff than what I do, we can figure something out that people can be present as part of that group.
Yeah.
And that to me is the best thing that's coming out of this. So
we should all have been, every church should have been using this technology already, right? We've had people who have stopped being able to go to church and are over in this care center or at home, and somehow we've forgotten our responsibility to them. And we had this technology where we could have been in their homes every single Sunday. And it's taken this to remind us that we should.
But if I play in the thing.
Ian left for college yesterday. It's a whole different thing, isn't it? Changes your whole world. Not necessarily for the worst, but it feels like it sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. But all those changes, I love this story that's talking about two babies that are talking about, they say that life after the womb is a better place, but I'm not sure. Let's stay here. Right? As you move down that birth canal, it is hard work. It's hurtful stuff that goes on. But you move into that different, wondrous space. I look at these two prophetic voices, the Dalai Lama, the Archbishop, how they move through the birth canal of their lives. Horrendous timing for both of them. But who they became because of that is incredible, isn't it? And I think that's the model that I hope we discover, is how to allow this moment, which is not nearly as bad, although in the moment it feels like it, that it can birth something like that in us. Some wonderful vision of possibility.
And I think that's why church is so important, is because it reminds you of those things.
Right.
Because if you get stuck in your own little brain, you can't move out of it. But if you with books and Zoom class and church and friends to remind you that there is hope, and this too will be very different. But to be patient and persevere. is not always easy. Sometimes it's easier than other times, right?
Yeah. Let me tell you one of the things that's really been cool for me during all of this. Okay, so today, this afternoon, we had the open committee, which is looking at what do we do to when it's time to reopen. What's the process we go through that, and what do we when we get to the final stage, which is the total opening and everything's back to normal, right? What is it that we choose to not be the old normal, but that becomes the new normal? So it's things like we've got to continue to have a video component that we're sending out every week because some of our folks will not be back. But here's what I told them. I said, I want to make sure that some of our meetings stay online because we're better online and we're shorter online. And I get through those meetings much better than if I had to sit in a meeting in a room with everyone. You might know that meetings are not my favorite part of my job. And I think we do meetings better online. What else do we do better by giving it a new definition? Because we were holding on to whatever the old definition was. You know, part of why I don't like meetings. You know how meetings developed in the Methodist Church, as in many churches, they developed because stay-at-home moms had no other place to be able to be social. So they'd come to church and they'd have meetings so they could have a social outlet. I don't usually want to go to a meeting to have a social outlet. I got plenty of social outlets, right? So I get frustrated when people are socializing in the midst of business. And so for me, having computer meetings is a much better option. So what else do we discover? What else becomes our new normal that is better? Maybe because we were forced into it, but we discover it's better for us. What's all this going to turn you into, Jade?
Well, I mean, I think it's the simplicity a lot that going back to things that are just basic. I think cooking every day has been really great. I make fresh tea every day constantly. I was talking to a couple people I know this week, and they were saying, "Oh, I just loved it when this COVID came up. I swim every morning now." And then someone else told me, for the first time as an adult, I take a nap after lunch. And all these things, these little things that make such a big difference. I do think that all of us on this meeting here, or this class, have not really been that affected compared to some people who are really suffering.
That's right.
And
I agree.
I mean, we're more, and I think that, we're a little bit unconnected from the people who really could, some of us, I know I am, who could really use the help. And I know that they're there, but we are a little bit isolated from helping people.
Yeah, but hopefully this reminds us of that. It was really hard when I sat with Marge today. This was the first time that I'd gotten to see her in person for months. Talked to her on the phone, right? But because of social isolation, I have not gotten to see her. And it sat me in a place where I had to say, okay, so what do we do? Right? I've had to learn to trust in things like, like yesterday when she went to the hospital, I called Mary Klein and said, "Mary, someone's over there. Can you go see her?" Right? Mary's a chaplain at TMC. So I knew that I could trust something larger. Typically I would get in my car, go over there, and I would take care of it. Right? We have to learn that Mary Klein going and seeing her is as good or maybe better than Jim going over and seeing her. Right? Whatever, and we have to learn all those things.
I guess I'm concerned about the voice I don't hear.
Yeah.
That needs to be, and just because, I know that there must be people who are really suffering even locally here.
Yeah.
That I know that I don't know they're suffering.
And are we trying to figure out purposefully those voices? Who are they that gets overlooked? The good news is that St. Francis has typically done a really good job trying to hear those types of voices. But like in our class this afternoon on white fragility, we realized that it's kind of hard for us to hear Black voices in Tucson, which has a very small Black population, and that's often very distant across the city somewhere. But how do we purposely overcome that to be able to be in that space? Because we can. We just have to do that hard thing, as the song says. But we can do that. So as we end, I want to end with a prayer. And it's a prayer that the Archbishop prayed to those children who cried as they remembered their story, as they struggled with the loss and the travel and the journeys that they'd had to make and the uncertain future in front of them. And he prayed this for them. Dear child of God, you are loved with a love that nothing can shake. A love that loved you long before you were created. A love that will be here long after everything has disappeared. You are precious, with a preciousness that is quite totally immeasurable. And God wants you to be like God, filled with life and goodness and laughter and joy. Please, my child, help me. Help me to spread love and laughter and joy and compassion. And you know what, my child? As you do this, you discover joy. Joy which you had not sought comes as a gift, as almost the reward for this non-self-regarding caring for others. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for the time together. It's been uplifting for my soul. It's been enriching. So thank you for your honesty and your conversation.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you for leading this.
It's my
And we've got movies coming up.
movies next week. We're going to be generally talking about them next week, and then we'll choose specific ones and we'll move forward with that. All right.
Okay.
Same time, same station, different topic.
Different topic.
Okay.
Bye now.
Thank you.
Stay well.
You too.
Take care.